What's up, everybody? I promised to do a follow-up last time, and one or two people asked me, so I figured I would go ahead and do that. First thing I want to show you, as I've mentioned online before, but you can take data readings of temperature, for example. So you can see this is the history for the middle unit here of these three. You see I have 1, 2, 3 sort of connected in series here, and if you look in the rear here of the middle unit, you'll see this thermometer there, and then there's one up at the top, for example, as well. It's kind of hidden back in there, but it is there. I don't worry so much whether I can see the display, since mainly I tend to take that data from the system. So basically you can display those on here. Actually, I think this is the top reading, looks like. So you can check the data if you have an iPhone, iPad, Android, whatever. These particular ones from SwitchBot, they only work locally unless you buy a separate unit, which will connect them to the internet so that they'll work when you're outside of the house as well. In my case, I don't really need to check the temperature from work or anything like that, so I'm not bothering to use that functionality. Just to give an idea of what's happened since last time, if anybody's seen last time and sees this time, or what's different. So basically the bottom two units, I planted a lot of cretonne, which I think is called watercress, so I'm just going to use that word. That stuff basically took over the entire middle and the entire bottom and crowded out everything else. It grows very fast and it grows very well in water. So what I ended up doing at some point was I just removed all of it from the middle. I cut it all out and I removed it, and then, lo and behold, there were some basil plants hiding in the back, for example. And then eventually I also went ahead and I removed all of the watercress from the bottom rank as well, and I moved some of the basil plants from the middle down to the bottom. So you can move them as long as the roots haven't gotten too intertangled. So I did go ahead and move those down here. I've cut them back about twice now. They're doing pretty well. These are the regular basil plants. You can actually see where I cut the watercress, and I just cut it down to a stump on this bottom rack here. I cut it down to a stump, and yet you can see there's some green growth coming out of there. And if you look at the one in the corner, there's even more growth coming out of there. So it's kind of amazing. I basically just killed the entire plant, and it's just growing back from a stump. So this one here is actually a basil plant. It's accidentally killed it and just left it to see if it'll come back or not. But it really is amazing that I just literally ripped everything out, cut everything off, and it's still growing back. These basil plants are a bit warped, and that's because they were mostly covered by the watercress before. If you go up to this middle rack, you'll see some of this lettuce leaf basil. So this stuff I was growing in another unit, and it just really didn't grow well. It was really stunted, and it had some black spots on it, just like leaf burn. And in fact, for example, this one here, and if you look up here, this one here, it's gotten huge in the past few days. But if you go and look at the original items, this is the unit I took them from. They're still just really scraggly. So whatever it is about this unit, they just don't like it, and they're not doing well. And I haven't figured it out, but I'm not very impressed with this unit to begin with. So whatever. So the middle two, or the middle and the bottom rack, were overrun with watercress. I took it all out, basically ate it all. It tasted great. I'm not a real big watercress fan. I just grew it more as an experiment than anything else, but it actually worked out pretty well. So the second thing, like I said, I moved some plants around. I stopped bothering to try and figure out what was what. So this particular middle rack here, you can see all these domes. Basically, I just decided to plant a whole bunch of new stuff. Now, obviously, if these all grow, there's not going to be enough room, so I'm going to have to move some of them around, but I just wanted to plant a whole bunch to get them started here. If they get started here, I'll move some to the cube unit and move some upstairs and like that. Okay, so again, this is the first time I've really grown this lettuce leaf basil. It's kind of an interesting variety. We'll see how it tastes, but it actually smells really good. So again, these ones all had a rocky start in that little the other unit there, but they do really seem to pick up once they've been transplanted into here. So this thermometer says 29 degrees. I really don't believe that this is 29 degrees, but I think it may be just the proximity to light, so I may move it down. It's just attached magnetically, so it's not that difficult to move around if need be. What else? The top unit here, you can see there's this huge, I'm not sure what it's called in English, but this thing, there was another one about this big and I moved it, and since I moved it to the aerial garden unit, it's gotten extremely huge, and I've been cutting it like every day or so. I've been cutting off a huge another leaf and it just keeps growing more, so that's a relatively amazing plant. It's like I cut off the outer leaves and more grow in the middle. This basil plant, it reached the top like a week ago and I cut it and it's reaching the top again. I'll probably move that to a unit where they're, can handle more height. There's some mint plants here. Yeah, they got a little bit of leaf burning when I was adjusting the nutrients. But there's spearmint and peppermint. And again, there's this basil, lettuce leaf basil. And the interesting thing to note is, although originally in the small unit there was some pock marks there, but since I transplanted it here, the new leaves, the new growth is a lot better, how to say. So if you look at the newest leaves, they don't have anything like that. So it seems to be going well, and I'll be interested to see how things go. So the second thing that I sort of wanted to mention is, since I have the water coming from a reservoir, what happens is the reservoir will slowly run out of water, especially when there's lots of crazy plant growth. The water goes down pretty quickly. So I do need to add more plant food, and I do need to test how much I've added, because it's a little bit difficult to make sure that it's always added exactly on time and whatnot. So in order to do that, I'm taking out water and I'm checking it with a meter. So for example, this one says 1351. So that's basically, if you're measuring EC, it's 1.351. So that's within the range that basil plants like. It's a little bit low for a lot of other plants. They say like 1.1 to 1.8 or something like that. It depends who you ask, but that's reasonable within the range. So basically, I filled up all the water, and then I started measuring the EC and adding nutrients, and measuring the EC and adding nutrients, and measuring the EC. I would usually wait a couple hours in between, because the water in the reservoir and the water that's actually in these units might be different, so I let it get pumped around a bit first before I do my final measurement. So it actually was like 1.6, and now that the other water's mixed together, it's 1.351. So that's just sort of what I do. This meter is not terribly accurate. It's a very cheap, like $13 meter from Amazon. I do have a better one on order, which will basically allow me to sync the data with the iPad that I use to keep all this data on. But I do have that. Likewise, the pH can be an important thing. So I do have a pH meter that I use. This says 5.74. So that's reasonable, again, for basil, and basil is mainly what I'm trying to grow. So if the other plants don't like the range I have, then tough, right? So it should be somewhere around 6.5, give or take, and down to 5.5 is basically okay for basil. I'll probably add some basic solution later to raise it up a little tiny bit, but I don't want to go overboard with adjusting it. So There are commercial pH up and pH down solutions, but the ones that you'll see advertised and mentioned on the English language websites are not typically available in Japan. If you can find them, they'll be overpriced. So what you want to do in general is go with Japanese vendors, or use something less professional. So I mean, to be honest, baking soda and lemon juice work just fine for pH down and pH up. So just something to keep in mind. Also, this meter is also very cheap and I don't trust it. So it's good for a quick measurement, but it seems to need calibration every single time you use it, and to make matters worse, it only comes with a small amount of calibration solution. So another thing I do is that I will use the pH testing liquid, and that's really easy to use because it does come with this little bottle is probably enough for a couple hundred samples at least. So I'll put that in there and test it, and basically in this case it's giving roughly the same answer. It says it's closer to 7. My meter says it's closer to 6. I tend to trust the liquid more than the meter at this point. Again, I do have a better meter on mortar, so we'll see how that works out and how it compares to the liquid. But for now, I'm mainly using the liquid, and just sort of testing with the meter to see if it's going up or down, rather than getting an absolute amount from the meter. So that's just to give an idea of what is going on here. As you can see, I've added there's actually 2 holes on the back of this one. One is for the incoming water, one is for the air. The other ones also have air in the small tube, and they have water in the larger tube in the corner. Basically, as I explained before, the water goes up, goes into this box. It flows out of the box slowly through the small tube. The small tube is just to make sure that it doesn't flow out too quickly. It goes into the first reservoir, it goes down this tube to the second reservoir, it goes down another tube to the third reservoir, and then it goes down another tube back to the actual reservoir where all the water sits. So it's difficult to see, but this is pretty much full right now. Right? So I did cover this. It's just a fish tank. I covered it with black foam, and you'll see that there's a strip that's uncovered. That's just so that I can kind of glance and tell what the water level is. So roughly speaking, this is the setup. It's working pretty well, I have to say. It depends what you grow, but in general, given that it's been winter time here until recently, and because there's 3 of them together, especially the middle one does stay reasonably warm, and the plants grow pretty well. They grow a bit better with the aeration turned on. These units do have built-in aerator already, but it only comes on for 5 minutes per hour. Since I added the extra aeration here, I've seen the growth increase a lot. In particular, this lettuce leaf basil, I sort of used this as a test because it was growing here for a couple weeks and it was just growing slowly. Then I added the extra